Good evening, everyone. Yes, it's Photography Live and Uncut again on Thursday evening, just a little bit earlier than usual because my guest has other commitments and I have commitments as well. So I'm delighted to have with me this evening Chris Marquardt from Germany. Welcome to my show, Chris.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure. Someone that I aspire to in terms of podcasting is over 670 odd shows from what I can work out and counting.
No end in sight.
Does it make you feel old when I say 670?
Well, I started the podcast about 10 years ago. So looking back, this is pretty much the one thing that I've done really regularly. And if you do the math, it's more than one episode a week in average. So it's really like the thing I've been doing most constantly in my life, and this for 10 years. And this is just so not me actually. So yeah, I'm really
on the other side of the fence being asked questions, so to speak.
Oh, that's fine. I'm totally happy. I mean, this is happens rarely enough that someone actually wants to know what I do, as opposed to me telling people what I think, how I think things should be done.
Because you're regular on Twit with the guys out in the States there with Leo.
With Leo Laporte. I have a weekly appearance on his radio show, which is another interesting thing because doing a podcast about photography in an audio only medium. I used to do some video, but most of it is in audio, and being as a guest on a radio show talking about photography is a strange kind of thing, but it works. It does work.
Yeah, it does. It's amazing the way things are developing. How Google Plus are going to sort of develop this, as we were saying just before the show, we'll wait and see. I noticed that Frederick was getting a little bit nervous talking about Google Plus Hangouts and presentations. So we'll wait and see what the guys at Google decide to do.
Well, they're splitting it up right now.
Yeah, they are. They're going to split it. You know, there's some photos, Hangouts, and all sorts of stuff. So we'll wait for the official announcement. As I like to start my show off nowadays, Chris, I'd like to sort of just get a geographical idea of where you are. Obviously, we know you're in Germany, but whereabouts in Germany?
I'm pretty much right outside Hanover, which is somewhere in the northern middle part of Germany. So I'm 10, 15 minutes outside of Hanover.
Have you always lived in Hanover?
No, I actually come from southern Germany.
All right.
Used to grow up near Stuttgart.
Yeah.
And moved to Tübingen, which is also down there, and then lived there for 10 years. And in between, I lived like all over the place. I lived in Dublin for 4 months at one point.
Really?
And now I moved up here to the north of Germany, which is also amazingly good.
Suits you well, does it? That's good.
Yeah, it does.
So let's get into the photography side of things. What's your first recollection of a camera that you can remember as a kid picking up a camera?
I remember that I used to actually got a camera for a present. It was a little compact, had 110 film in it, so the little cassettes of film in it. Had a red button. I think it was a Kodak, but I'm not sure exactly what it was. It was a plastic camera.
Something like an Instamatic type thing.
Sort of an Instamatic kind of thing. Yeah. And I shot pictures. Actually, a few of those have survived, and it's just the most weird type of photography, just point and click, and
it is, isn't it?
What I did, yeah.
It's strange. Did that sort of spark an interest with you in those early days, or was it just basically a camera that you had? And
no, not at all.
Much like me, by the sound of things, yeah.
Took. I mean, that was. I must have been 7 years or something. Yeah. No real development of interest yet at that age, at least not for me. I was much more into music back then. That was much more interesting. So the camera was not really a central thing for me, and it only became central, I think, when I turned 14. That's when it started to become really interesting.
It's interesting you say music again, because this is a continuing theme that I'm finding with.
I know, yeah.
Rick Salmon, and I spoke to Scott Wyden last couple of weeks ago. Both majored. Well, Rick majored in music. Scott switched from his major in music to photography. But it's interesting how they sort of go in parallel almost, isn't it?
You know, I wanted to become a sound engineer. And there's an official way to study that in Germany with an official degree, but I found out pretty much at the point when I had everything together and had the applications ready to send off to different schools. I found out that there's an ear disease in my family that's that my mother had and her siblings had and my grandmother had, and they all so apparently the same thing that Beethoven had and
Oh,
went
right.
deaf.
Okay.
And it luckily didn't break out. My ears are still fine, but it was really that point where I had to decide: do I go the music route or do I do something else? And that something else back then actually ended up being going into computers.
Okay.
So the whole my geek angle pretty much manifested itself in that. But I come from a creative side and from the music and from that visual field, so it really it was really this the creative side and the computer and tech side pretty much went hand in hand right from the start there.
You mentioned about the creative side of your family. What was your family involved with? Photography and painting as well, or?
My grandfather was a painter. Well, he had like a daytime job, but he
Sure.
painted a lot. My uncle is actually an artist. He's a jeweler. He makes
All right.
kind of expensive gold and expensive stones kind of jewelry, and there has always been, and he was actually an important influence on me, so there was always a bit of an artistic angle. My father's, and that's on my mother's side. My father's side, I think two or three generations back, it was a family of altar builders. They made altars for churches.
Oh, really?
And like woodwork and very artsy, artistic kind of stuff. And so I've always kind of had a bit of that around me, at least to the point where it was so normal for me to have these kind of things and some of the artifacts around me that it was never really out of the question to do something artistic. It wasn't like my parents would have said, no, you can't do anything artistic because it doesn't pay the bills. But they also didn't push me into the computer direction. So they pretty much gave me the freedom to decide. And that's actually a good thing. I mean, really helped me with my overall development to not have been set on any rails to go a certain way.
I think you're right. I think when you got a situation where you got children, you just basically say you got to let them go their own route, you know. And if you can give them some guidance, then fine. But so in between the ages of 7 and 14, 15, by the sound of things, when the photography really clicked on, did you draw? Did you paint? Was there anything like that, or were you, like me, a little bit drawn towards the football or the rugby pitch?
No sports inclination here whatsoever. My parents, actually, that's the sort of thing. My parents tried to send me to like a ping pong club and different kind of things, and tried out different things, but none of that really stuck with me. So I was always into the creative side of things. I remember in art education at school, which we had once a week, I was usually the one who had kind of the funny ideas or did things in a bit of an unconventional way. And luckily, I always had teachers there who understood that there is some creativity here. So that was always kind of in a good situation there. I never had a teacher who tried to beat things out of me or beat other things into me.
That's good. Would you say then that at that early age you were someone that sort of was prepared to think outside the box?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I get that definitely from the way you're describing it. So let's fast forward to around about 14 or 15 by the sound of this. Is this when you bought your first camera?
Well, the first real one, the first more serious camera, even though that was still not, by far not, I was still not thinking about doing any of this in a serious professional kind of way. But that was sometime in the 80s, and it was the Minolta X700, which was my first camera, and it stayed my camera until I went digital. I mean, the X700 was really a brilliant camera, no autofocus, had automatic settings, so you could a pretty good light meter, did a good job, was ruggedly built, or ruggedly enough for me, and a few lenses, and that's pretty much what I shot with until 2000 and I don't even know, 2003, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, when you said Minolta 700, was that the one that you used to buy the little discs and you used to slot them into the side of the camera, which would give you different effects? Was that a later one?
No, plain old camera. You get a semi-automatic, so you chose the aperture, and the camera would do the shutter speed, and so that's aperture priority all the way for me.
Yeah,
and it took me years. Years later, I only learned how to shoot manual and how to do exposure right, and I let the
Yeah.
camera do most of that for the first few years.
So from about the age of 14, when did photography start really getting serious for you?
Oh, that was right from the start. I remember an uncle of mine who was into photography. He had like a huge stack of photo magazines and camera stuff in there, and a bit about creativity and stuff. So he one day handed me that, and then I was lost, and I dug into that, and I started photography. And for cost reasons, I mostly shot slide film back then,
Yeah.
and which again kind of helped me to try to nail things. And I learned pretty fast how to meter the X700 has a little button in the front that you press down and it locks the exposure, and then you can meter on something and then shoot somewhere else with that exposure. On a Canon DSLR, there's a little star key on the back, pretty much does
Yeah.
the same thing. And that was kind of the most important tool for me to try to nail the exposure and to learn what the camera actually looks at when it shoots and how that applies to the other
Yeah.
parts of the scene.
It's interesting you say that, because I used to shoot a lot using the transparencies. Kodachrome 64, I suppose, was my favorite. I used to use the Ektachrome 200. I never really used any of the other products, Agfas and
I'm a
the
Fuji
like.
Velvia guy.
You were Fuji, well, exactly this. I was just going to say Fuji, funny enough, because I'm now a Fuji camera user. But
I didn't do much in terms of comparing. I mean, I've 14 years.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a financial thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was always super happy how the Fuji cameras gave really like a huge boost to the color saturation. Grass on lawns and meadows was like so saturated green.
Yeah, they always seem to have, in my opinion, from what I look back now, the Fuji film used to have a bias towards landscape photographers, and I think the Kodachromes were definitely biased towards the portrait photographers because of their bias towards that color, especially on the Kodachromes. And I remember one holiday I went on, I in actual fact braved and used 25 ASA, or ASA it was then in those days, wasn't it, for the Kodachromes, and that was very, very difficult to use, even in the bright sunny days. But I never actually went to Fuji. Is it strange? It's like Nikon on Canon, isn't it? I never switched.
Well, yeah, I don't even. Well, I think initially I was drawn to Fuji mainly for the price.
Yeah.
And but I again, I mean, Fuji, especially Velvia, is one of those crisp, punchy films.
Yeah.
Provia is a bit more subdued in terms of the contrasts, but those two are pretty much the ones that I just ended up gravitating towards.
You still shoot film now from time to time?
I do.
When you shoot film, is it the Fuji film that you use, or have you used others?
Most of my film work nowadays I do on black and white, actually.
Right. Okay.
It's one of those things that are easy to develop, where you have a lot of influence on how the contrasts come out, how the grain comes out, just by developing in different ways, by developing either with different temperatures or different dilution in the chemistry, or by different agitation. You can influence so many things. You have such a creative handle on how the film comes out when you shoot black and white, whereas in color with the standard C41 process or the E6 slide film process, those are mostly industrialized, automated. So
you got to stick to it, haven't you?
Well, they do this in development. So you shoot and they develop, but they develop it in a machine and everything comes out the same way. Yes, you can push color film, but most people just don't do it. And with black and white, you have like a whole. It's not just the negative and then the enlargement on the positive. It's the negative, but the process before getting the developed negative is such a big creative playground.
Yeah, but we'll come back to that, because I know that it's now you're doing a lot more film photography now than you did before. But let's go back to when you actually got the Minolta and you stuck with that until basically around about 2003, I think you said. What was the first digital camera then that you bought?
Oh, that was the Canon D 300. No, 300D.
300D.
See, I'm surrounded. Actually, my fiance shoots Nikon. I shoot Canon. I shoot pretty much anything I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
So I mix up the numbers. No, it's the silver plastic original digital Rebel, as it's called in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I'm guessing now. I think it would be the 300D because the
In Japan,
D300
it
was
was
the
called the
Nikon one.
Kiss.
Okay. So when you bought that, what was your setup? What sort of lenses did you get along with that sort of camera?
Oh, for quite a while, I shot with a kit lens. I started. I got a 50 millimeter, 1.8, as most people do, and then I I started to decide what I would need. And back from the analog days, I was used to 70 to 200 range, which didn't really apply there because it's got an APS-C sensor, so it's not
Sure.
35 millimeters, and that made things a bit difficult. So I was trying out different focal lengths and things, and at one point I ended up going mostly back to the 50 millimeter actually, and one lens that was a bit wider, I think it was a 35. And these days I'm back to full frame, which kind of feels like home again.
Yeah.
And most of the time now I shoot 24 millimeters.
24. I was going to ask you, what's your preferred lens now? 24 mil.
It is not just a 24. I shoot a 24 tilt shift most of the time.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which kind of comes from my I got into that because I started exploring when I started rediscovering analog.
Yep.
After doing pretty much for 10 years doing exclusively digital, and I started rediscovering it. I all of a sudden had the opportunity to go larger formats. 35 millimeter was kind of the limit for me for the longest time, but then at the point when everyone was switching, and even most professional photographers were switching to digital, there were so many medium format cameras and even large format cameras on the market for really affordable money. So I got a Mamiya 645. That was my first medium format camera, and then a Rolleiflex and different other kinds of folding cameras and things. So I tried a lot of things, and then at one point I ended up going to large format. You can see the
I can see it behind you. Yeah,
a 4x5, which was a revelation when it comes to influencing the focal plane and influencing the perspectives and how where you place the horizon without changing, without having falling lines, and or with deliberately adding falling lines to exaggerate a feeling that the viewer might get or that you want the viewer to have. And that pretty quickly translated back into wanting that in the 35 millimeter format, because 35 is always with you and it's easy to carry around. And so I bought a used 24 tilt shift lens from an architectural photographer for I think 500 euros. So this is really kind of a bargain.
Yeah,
pretty beaten up, but I do not care about what my cameras look like or how many dings they have. So
as long as they work.
As long as they work. And this is pretty much I can go to on a 4-week Himalayan hike with just that lens.
That's lovely.
It'll work for me.
I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to the to your well, in actual fact, what we'll do, let's go to screen share now, because I think that's a real sort of segue of what you've given us there, because we can look at your photographs, and there are two particular areas which I wanted to choose. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can see it.
That's lovely. Okay, so there's two which we spoke about before. One I wanted to talk about first of all is Hokkaido, and then you mentioned Ethiopia. So we'll do the Ethiopia one after this, because obviously our good friend Martin Bailey we've seen quite a lot with. He does his trips up to Hokkaido with his
I did that one in 2013 together with Martin, actually.
I was gonna ask you that very next question. Was this with Martin?
Yes, it was.
Beat me to it.
Well, Martin and I go way back, actually to the early days of podcasting, because we both were podcasting. I think both started in 2005, and Actually, later we were both part of the Photocast network, which doesn't exist anymore. But back then, I founded a photography podcast network together with a few friends, including John Arnold and Ibernex Perello and some others. And we ended up having, this was a loose kind of set of photo podcasts. We shared advertising, and we advertised each other to try to increase the listener numbers. And Martin and I go back to that.
That's lovely, because Martin's great. Martin, in actual fact, was he's the person who encouraged me to start this this show.
Great.
He said to me, you know, if you're going to do it, but stick with it. There's going to be some bad times, some good times. He said, but you must stick with it. So
that's what I keep saying. If you want a podcast, just go for it and develop it as you go.
Exactly right. Yeah, this is true. Anyway, so we're you got this great title. This one, Steam. Tell us about this image here, Chris.
Oh, it's just that's out to the sea in Hokkaido, and with the sea ice pushing into the front, and there are also all these hot springs. So some of that water coming in from the side, from I think it was a river, and just the steam coming up, and then a bit of wind caught that, and I think I fired like 4 or 5 shots there, and that's just the one I really like because of the contrast between the foreground and the background.
And the crane, the crane study.
Yeah, I like picking out a detail here and there. So that is definitely not a 24 millimeter. I didn't shoot too much 24 back in Hokkaido because there was a lot of wildlife, and 24 millimeters and the cranes, that would have been way too far away. But just some lines and things, and I like not showing everything. I like to leave a bit to the imagination.
You're exactly right.
And because that's when the viewer will inevitably start adding in their own context, and that's how you put stories in pictures. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, it's a good capture here of the red head of the bird in the background there,
which adds a bit of a focal point.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, same again as you've just said. You're catching part of the image here rather than getting the whole of the crane. But again, you got to.
And the light was just nice because there's not much doctoring or anything on these pictures, because with the snow, and they were all on a big surface of snow, so all the shadows are nicely filled in because there's a lot of reflection going on. So
let's just check out the gear that you're using here. This is obviously the Canon.
It's a Canon. It's
and what's the lens you got on there?
It is not even a very super specialized wildlife lens. It's the 70-300.
Okay.
Which did the job just fine there, and 2 times extender made by Kenko.
Okay.
So it's not even the Canon extender doesn't work on that because it protrudes too far into the lens area.
I'm with you.
So the Kenko is a good choice here.
I love this shot.
Oh, that was
I love this shot.
Well, this is one of these areas where you can usually get the cranes in the background in the morning sun, the sun coming up from behind, and then the steam rising, and the cranes stand in the water because that's where they sleep, because they're safe there from animals trying to eat them.
Yeah.
And we weren't lucky. The weather wasn't in our favor, but then it turned this whole landscape into this misty scene, and
very moody scene, isn't it?
Very moody, and I really love that about Hokkaido, because it doesn't really matter up there what kind of a weather you have. You will always find something interesting to shoot.
Yeah, I think we've got to check out the snow monkeys.
Of course,
of course. Look at the faces. They're absolutely.
They're just so much fun to be around.
Yeah, exactly right.
So nice.
Martin, I remember saying in one of his podcasts, was saying that he did say that you can't sort of get too close to these monkeys. They is there a danger point of view? Do the monkeys have a tendency to turn?
Go back to the overview. Let me point one picture out here, which is the big one.
This one here.
Yes, Meh. that one.
Meh.
Now that actually has been taken with my 24.
Wow.
Shift lens. So I was about yeah, 20, 30, 40 centimeters away from him at
Wow.
max. And what I did here was I actually shot it in a way, and he was just resting there.
Yeah.
And these monkeys are used to people, so it's
Mm.
not like there are photographers there, so they have seen their fair share of photographers, I'm pretty sure. But I love that, and I love the way that you can use a tilt shift lens to tilt the focal plane. So this is actually a tilted focal plane going through the hands and then through the eyes. So it's like a forward tilted plane kind of cutting through the face and the hands to keep both in focus.
Okay. And he didn't make any reaction for you being that close.
No, he was just
Dozing.
resting and
That's
dozing.
nice.
And I mean, yes, if you get too close,
Yeah, exactly.
they have sharp teeth, so
Yeah,
be careful there.
exactly.
But it's also a human element because everyone can see themselves in that picture, and somehow you can relate to it.
I think you can relate to those. Absolutely.
Also to the
Absolutely.
cranes, like if a crane is dancing in front of the camera, it sometimes looks very human in terms of the motions and the poses.
So just a little bit of a different aspect. That's the nature side of your photography, and obviously a little bit of landscape. And here we're sort of bringing in landscape, but also almost like a documentary type style, dare I say, where we've got this image here, which is
That's Erta volcano in
unbelievable.
Ethiopia. I mean, this whole trip, we did that last year in November, and it was actually the first scouting trip I've done. I mean, I've done travels, but I've usually relied on others who have been there and who are also photographers and who know how things go there, or who have done this before, and then I team up. Such as Hokkaido. I mean, Martin is the expert up there, and I was pretty much tagging along, and my whole business is moving more into the travel area now. I just got the opportunity to go on that Ethiopia trip as a scouting trip, and I took the opportunity, obviously. So we were three photographers up there, spending 2 weeks in this amazing country, and it's just the variety is such. It's so amazing to see like a live volcano and old towns and areas. Most of the areas have hardly any tourism, so it's very unspoiled. It's very people are very open, very friendly. I mean,
As you can see from this image, they're very open and friendly. Do you find that you get into a situation where you got a problem on your hands with regards to taking photographs? Because sometimes the Muslim faith gets a little bit sort of
depends on where you are. On where you are. I mean, if you get further south or further into the Muslim areas in Ethiopia, it definitely helps if you have a guide with you, someone who speaks the language. And Ethiopia has over 80 different languages, so you kind of, depending on the area you go, you need someone who speaks the language. And as soon as that's the case, they can help break the ice. But the nonverbal communication also is easy. If you have a camera, you point, you gesture, can I take your photo? And most people are just very happy to just ignore me when I shoot or pose. Him I actually had asked if he could open the window, and he did. So
that's nice of him. Yeah,
that's very nice of him. And then just one of the highlights out of many was the volcano, which is just as a live volcano. It's very hot at the rim there.
I was going to say, this is the crew basically. Well, it looks of things.
No, it's actually another. That's one of the few areas where we actually met a few other tourists.
Wow.
And these guys were, as you can see, two of them were gas masks.
Yeah.
Which allowed them to be closer to the rim. It's like, you have to imagine it's like a campfire, and if you sit on the wrong side of the campfire, you get all the smoke.
Yep.
And this is a crater that's about 50 meters, 150 feet in diameter. And you can walk around it. And in this case, it keeps changing. But in this case, the lava was about 10 meters below us. So you had this this cauldron of
Yeah.
bubbling lava and little like tectonic plates moving, like small on a small scale. You have these cooled down crusts on top that are then being pushed apart, and fresh lava is coming in between them.
Amazing
It's
experience.
it's really amazing experience, yeah.
It's
And so it's this really interesting mixture between people and landscapes and architecture and the colors and the some wildlife.
yeah.
The oryx here, for example. So it's this mixture that really blew me away, and so
Was
many.
it, and it sounds to me as though it's, as you say, it's something which is appealing to you now in terms of your the type of photography which you want to do now.
Well, looking back at my life, I always enjoyed this. The thing that happens when you travel is you kind of have to leave your comfort zone a bit.
Yeah.
You go to a new area, you don't know how things work, you don't speak the language, are you don't know the customs, and which means you will always kind of be slightly outside where you feel at home.
Oh,
um, and doing that is something that just so in such a wonderful way makes your horizon so much bigger. It gives you
yeah.
so many more perspectives. And so every time I come home from some travel, I'm just all I don't know how to say that, but I'm excited, I'm ecstatic, I'm energized, and I end up and I ended up kind of finding that the photography and that go really well together. So having that kind of a teaching background and doing photo workshops and things has now more and more moved into doing photo tours and trying to see interesting
So you
places.
say on that Ethiopia trip there was just three of you at that particular time, Chris, or
It
was it
was,
more?
and we're actually now offering that as a tour
I was
in.
going to say, is that a sort of like a sort of a tester to see if that is
Yep.
something which is suitable where you can do a workshop? Like, as I've seen your videos and some of your podcasts that you've done from the Himalayas and Mount Everest, which you've done. How many times you've done this one? Four times, is it?
Well, it's never the same. It's I team up with a friend. Actually, the originator of that is my friend John Miller in Colorado. He's a filmmaker, and he did a pod. This is where podcasting brings the world together. He's a
Yeah.
podcaster. He does a video podcast about the Himalayas, pretty much. And I found that. I started watching it. I sent him an email. He sent me an email back saying that he's listening to my show. He's a listener. So this ended up turning into a friendship. And then he asked me one day if I wanted to hold a photo workshop at Mount Everest base camp, which changed my life pretty much.
Unbelievable.
So 2 years later, we actually took 10 photographers up to.
I was going to
Mount
say, I
Everest
think
base
that's probably
camp.
the one which I saw where you had quite a crew going with you
Yeah, and
into
we've
this
done this.
place.
We've been to
But
Tibet.
look at that scenery.
We've been to all three different. Mount Everest does have three base camps.
Right.
It's like a pyramid. It's like a three-sided pyramid. So it's got one in the north, one in the south, and one in the east. And we've been to all the three base camps. We've taken photographers to all of them. So we've been to on the northern side in Tibet. We've been several times on the southern side in Nepal, and just hiking up there, the people, the landscapes. In most of those areas, especially on the Nepal side, there's no traffic, no cars, no roads. It's just walking. It's porters, it's yaks, it's donkeys.
And how did you get on with the climate change for yourself? Because obviously you're at high altitude there, aren't you? How did you get on with that?
Well, first of all, I did a bit of preparation. You cannot really prepare for the altitude. You prepare for just the hiking.
Yeah.
And what you have to do then, and we are really lucky to have an amazing Sherpa team to help us there. They're all like trained mountain guides, and you have to acclimatize. You have to take it slow. You cannot climb more than about 300 meters a day. That's about how much you can gain in altitude without running into issues.
Yeah.
And you have to have a rest day every now and then to help acclimatize even more.
So it's definitely not a place which you can say, well, I'm going to push myself and we're going to make this particular point by a specific day. No. Your body's got to be right for it.
And then some still get problems, but the Sherpas are really good at spotting problems. And if you really run into a problem, you have to
Take
turn
a rest.
around and get no, go lower, go lower. I
Oh,
mean,
go lower, right.
there are serious things that can happen.
Yeah, sure.
And it takes a lot of energy out of the picture you're just showing.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of energy. That's John, one of our friends who came with us. He took a nap. He had to.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. I just saw that as you were talking about taking it easy. I thought that's a lovely image to kind of. But
it's there's a lot of effort to do that, and
Yeah.
I'm not a sporty type of guy. I'm on the chubby side, but there is a lot of effort to do that, and there's a lot of even pain when you're there, and it's every now and then while doing these things, I just sit back and go, why on earth am I doing this?
Yeah.
And when you've done it, the reward is so amazing. The people you meet, the cultures, and every time, just like the minute I'm back, I want to go again.
I was going to say you'll want to go again. There's been some other photographers that talked about this region, and they all say the same. That
and it's not necessarily just the landscape; it's the people.
Yeah, exactly.
The people you meet. We now have a team there that is kind of at least overlaps with the team of the other years. So we have some of the same Sherpas coming with us up there, and so they have turned into friends, and it's just wonderful to see them again. So we have a bit of a steady element in there.
That's lovely. I think it's certainly, you can see from the photography here, the images that you've produced, it's a place that you enjoy going.
Mm-hmm. And again, most of that is 24 millimeters.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's super. We'll come out of the screen share now. Good selection of images we've shown there of your work, Chris. Really, really good. Let's talk about these workshop stroke tours that you were organizing. The Himalayas is now, how many times have you been there? 4, maybe 5 times. It's going to be a regular thing for you, is it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we've done it on average about every 2 years.
Okay.
But it really has to fall into place. And John Miller, my friend, is the main organizer. He's the one who pretty much thinks about what to do. We have this thing that we don't want to repeat things exactly the same way. We want something new. Also, not just to attract the repeat business, but also for ourselves. We want to see new things and experience new areas. So that's one of the things we're trying, and then it also has to do with are we all available at the same time? And
yeah, exactly right. So and the planning. The planning must take a long time for a trip such as that.
Planning takes a long time, and it's just one of those things that everything has to come together. So there might be one in 2016. There might be one in 2017. We just don't know just yet.
Yeah. So I'm want to book on a Chris Marquardt workshop. What are you going to offer me as a potential person joining your what's the significant points of your workshops that you can offer the visitor, the joiner?
So I don't have an elevator pitch, if that's what you're asking for. I think I'm well, and people can hear me on the podcast. I think I have enough enthusiasm for what I do, and I think I'm doing a decent job in making things easy to understand, in explaining things in a way that that you can understand, even if you're new to photography, or there are so many concepts that are even for some professionals are not really that deeply ingrained. And I've in the past, I think, done a decent job, but that's the kind of feedback I get.
Yeah.
In getting people to learn something. And what's really important for me is that learning, you can buy a book, you can listen to podcasts, and obviously I recommend doing that. But the best way to learn is to do it. The best way to learn is to practice, and doing that in an environment that is fun and that is easy going. And I'm very easygoing. I'm not this teacher with a whip.
No.
And doing this in an environment, and that's one of the things about the travel, doing this in an environment that is conducive to the learning. What better can you do? I mean,
yeah. When you're doing these trips, obviously the amount of different styles of cameras which people are bringing along to the event, do you find the majority of people that come to your workshops are using DSLR cameras, or are people stretching towards the mirrorless these days?
Well, it's some are moving towards the mirrorless. I think it's still the majority is on the DSLR at this point. And I'm a DSLR guy, and as much as I like the idea of having something not as heavy to carry around, what's holding me back at this point is the speed and access of buttons and dials. I need to have quick access to the things. Is the availability of lenses, especially the 24 tilt shift, is I can't live without it anymore.
No. And it's a bit pointless putting that on a mirrorless camera with an adapter when
you don't gain anything.
Don't gain a thing
in terms
do you?
of size. No, not really. No. Also, an entire system change. I mean, it would be a system change, and the only system right now that has full frame and is kind of compact are the Sony A7s.
Yep.
So having to switch over the entire system, I don't see the point. I achieve what I want to achieve with the camera I have. So I've learned a long time ago that the new camera is not going to make me a better photographer in any way.
There's very wise words from the start off. You know, a camera doesn't make you a better player.
But then I'm also a
golf
geek,
club doesn't make you a better golfer.
I'm also a geek. I also want to play with toys. So luckily, that urge is kind of taken care of by. I do a German photo podcast called Happy Shooting, which we have a sponsor for. It's a photo accessory company, and as one of the sponsorship things we do is we test gear for the show. So we test something, we talk about it on the show. So I get new gear here all the time. I have to send it back usually, but I get to test out a lot of things. So that the urge of, I want to get my hands on this or that is usually, it doesn't really exist with me anymore.
It's enough to satisfy your curiosity. So I did it only a couple of weeks ago, funny enough. I hired an 18-135 Fuji XF lens, which I was thinking about buying. And I used it over the weekend. Just did some photography around the house and stuff like that. I was due to go on a walkabout, but I mean, and I found that by doing that, it cured my curiosity about the lens. And would I buy it? No, I wouldn't. I don't need it.
That's I think one of the best recommendations anyway. If anyone is interested in getting a certain lens, find a way to rent it or find a way to borrow it from a friend or someone else, or join a community. I mean, for example, I have a community around my podcast on Google+. So people there actually sometimes swap gear, or they come to a workshop, and I don't just do the travel. There's also some local workshops. So people come to the workshops, and then some of those turn into like this gear swapping bazaar almost. Like, oh, you have this one. Can I try it for half an hour? Or people ask me, can I use your tilt shift lens for an afternoon? And I'm happy to oblige. So
yeah, no, it is a very good way of trying other things out. I'm not convinced by the Sony system myself, although I have switched to Fuji from the Nikon gear, and that purely and simply is because my preference for photography is street photography, and I was looking for
that's
perfect
camera for that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I bought the XE1 and then I bought the X100S, and that just suits me down to the ground for what I want to do. But I was tempted with this 18-135, and I thought, well, I'll give it a high. I wrote a review on it, and so it satisfied my curiosity to say no, thank you. I'll stick with what I've got. It suits me down to the ground. Let's talk about your future plans. Actually, no, I tell you what. Let me go back one question which I missed earlier on. Your inspiration. I think you made a comment a short while ago. Someone that has inspired you a lot. Would it be a family member that's inspired you in your photography, or is it a body of work?
Well, it's my uncle, the jeweler, who has he has inspired me in some ways, but he has also shown me that art is something you can actually do, and it's not something that you shouldn't do because it doesn't pay the bills. So it's really helped me to have someone like him in the family, because I always had this behind the scenes view there, how the art is one thing and the presentation and the client facing side of it, but then there's also the very down to earth, like creating something part, the craft part, the getting your hands dirty part to get something done. And to see these two sides and to understand that there's this creation and then the presentation has really helped me with my, let's call it, artistic development.
Yeah, sure. I can see where you're coming from on that. Actually, it is nice to have someone in sort of you're related to, that is close to you, that you can see on a regular basis, and see how they've not only developed their own business, but at the same time developed their artistry.
Oh, and he is now somewhere around 70, and he has this entire body of work that goes back to when he was a student, and
Amazing.
he's completely self-taught, and he
Yeah,
dug out all these old processes. Maybe my love with analog is influenced by that. I've just come to think of it. He dug out like old processes to apply little gold pearls onto a surface that in the way that they attach but don't melt, and it's like a process that is ancient and that no one actually does. There are like 2 or 3 people in the world who still do that process, and he unearthed it and trained himself to do it. And so there are so many things that, and then he also wasn't shy to use modern technology. He now has like a laser welding machine, so he's using all these from high, actually there's even some 3D printing now, so it's some high-tech stuff and some very old ancient low-tech stuff, and the combination of that, I think that's what I see in my analog photography. So
yeah.
I've never thought about it this way, but thanks for asking.
No, so it's amazing what you come at. But I want to ask you one question. I think it was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where you got everyone going, where you came across this great idea of a camera, which was a clear perspex box, effectively.
The invisible camera.
The invisible camera.
Did you fall for it?
I signed up for it, but I knew exactly what it was all about. But it was one of those things. Have you ever watched a movie where you think, I'm not really enjoying this movie, but I've got to know how it ends up and what happens in the end?
Yeah.
That was the reason why I wasn't going to fall for it. But
well,
whose idea was that?
It was not my idea. It was Alan Attridge, a friend of mine. He's a filmmaker, and he also does a podcast, the Two Hosers podcast. He's Canadian. He actually lives in Tübingen, Germany, where I used to live. So.
Canadian. Blame the Canadians.
It's a Canadian, yeah. No, he brought up the idea of an April Fool's joke of sport, and we started geeking out and started putting weird ideas on a drawing board, and we ended up with that story of a camera that is light amplifying and doesn't have certain properties, and we have a Max Planck Institute in Tübingen, so we did some outside shots and we faked.
I thought the videos were great. I really did.
It was really well produced. It was a lot of reading of a piece of paper and trying to memorize the lines and making it look convincing. And it was, in the end, it wasn't necessarily, we weren't out to fool people and then go, nah, you're idiots.
No.
We were not doing that. It was, for us, it was an exercise in storytelling, because it was a story. You built this story and you put it out, and if you're convincing, then you can tell any story. And we had this good mixture of people trusting me. Some people now don't trust me as much anymore after that. And we had a ton of fun producing it. So we learned a lot through producing it. And actually, when it really started taking off, and within a few days we had like 1,500 people sign up for the early field test. We pulled the plug like after a few days. I was like, oh my god, this is getting scary. So we pulled the plug and we stopped it, and we put a reveal out, because we were really getting signups from. I actually got an email from someone who is in special effects in big Hollywood productions, and he was so eager to get his hands on that camera. I've got to have it. It's amazing. And he was not. I mean, he completely fell for it, and we had so many professionals from different fields who fell for it.
Were you disappointed at the end that it was? in the UK we say a wind up. Were you disappointed in the end that it wasn't a real camera that you were able to bring to the table?
Oh, I would have loved to bring that camera to the table, but I mean, just from a technical
Well,
point of
from a
view,
technical point of view, we
we're
know.
talking about terapixels and
Yeah,
fractional
exactly.
ISOs and weird concepts that were introduced there.
Yeah,
That all in themselves kind of had some merit, and there were some precedents in some of the cases. So you could actually look some of those things up and find information.
yeah. Who
Um,
made the camera for the
that was
video?
a that was actually a friend of mine is a furniture maker, and I asked him if he knew where to make that kind of a box, and
Yeah.
he had a supplier who does perspex work, and he just sent him some rough plans and go do it, and it cost me
Have you still got that?
I still have it. It cost me 65 euros.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
Pride of shelf, I bet. Now, was that camera the instigator of your return to 4x5 film photography, large format camera, or had this happened before?
No, I had already had the plan to make a 4x5 international back compatible pinhole camera, and we had a prototype. So the invisible camera was actually modeled after that. It's the same shape pretty
Yeah,
much.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah. And what are your future plans now, Chris, with your photography and your workshops?
Well, I have for the last 2 3 years, actually more than that. I started going more into the travel
Hmm.
field, photo travel, go to places. Actually, come to places again in October. I will be going to Donegal in Ireland.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
Mm.
I'll also come back to the United States, where I haven't been for several years now.
Hmm.
So at least not for photo workshops. So I'll be in San Diego. I'll be in New York. I want to be able to extend that a bit, because travel, at least I want to do at least 3 to 4 bigger kind of trips a year,
Hmm.
which is kind of the limit in terms of being away from home, and
Yeah.
because I also need to be here. Another plan is the Viewfinder Villa, which which is the place we now live. We just moved into a new house here outside Hanover, which is a beautiful old villa,
Hmm.
big rooms. I actually have 4 business rooms here now. So it's a bit of a living and working kind of thing. There's
All
space for
right.
seminars here. We have a dark room, like a proper dark room with
Hmm.
enlargers.
Hmm.
Um, there's a photo studio. There's like a digital suite, which is for scanning and other digital work. So there's all this thing, that the whole teaching thing kind of. I want to be able to do something more local, or maybe even people travel here. We're going to do the villa warming party, as we call it,
Hmm.
in 2 weeks, and there's like 25 people are going to travel here, and
So this
500.
teaching thing now is not necessarily workshops going away, a la Valerie Jardin style and Martin Bailey going away to certain areas. You're looking really to bring this all encompassing, basically bring it at home as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Actually, I kind of need to also teach the bread and butter
Mhm.
workshops, as I
Mhm.
call them, the basics. I'm really happy to teach beginners, because I think that's where that's where you can, as a teacher, either mess things up for life or help them get a good start. So
Yeah.
I'd rather be the second kind of teacher. Um, and I want, the thing is, I get bored easily. I get bored so easily. So I need a bit of a new thing here and there, and that's the travel. That's the different new locations.
But it's all basically around teaching. I'm finding this interesting now because in terms of your teaching, is this something which you've always wanted to do to teach, or is it just something which is developed from your photography interest?
It has developed from the interest, and in my previous life, when I worked in the IT industry, I
Right.
did a lot of teaching there as well. So I'm happy with. Actually, I was always happy with teaching, but starting to do this on my own, starting to start the workshops and things, where I can then also bring my photography experience in, has just turned out to be something that I seem to be made for. It
That's,
it
yeah.
really gives me the best feelings if I realize that someone just learned something. That
That's
someone,
fantastic.
if you see someone, if I see someone walking away from a workshop with these little sparks in their eyes, going, "Oh, I had a big aha moment." This is one of my goals for every workshop and tour, to give everyone at least 3 to 4 big aha moments, big realizations, big epiphanies, and I think I'm doing okay on that.
That's good. No, I think you're right. Actually, I used to teach golf myself, and when you saw the kids go away and they went up running up to their mother and father and said, "Oh, I've done this today," you get a real buzz from it, don't you?
And it's the same for me. I mean, I do this because I know what I feel like when I learn something new. And
yeah, exactly.
every time there's not a single day in my life where I don't learn something new. And I never want to stop learning, because having learned something new is such a gratifying experience.
And you obviously learn things from your teaching experiences, where someone come up and ask you a question.
The teacher always learns most.
Exactly right. Exactly.
That's just a fact.
Okay. Let's talk about your favorite photographer, Chris. I gave you the option prior to the show whether we do the 5 photographer one word association. A lot of guys are sort of swerving that idea at the moment. I think I'll have to come up with a different idea now. But let's ask, who's the photographer at the moment that you seem to be following more than you have done in the past? Is there one?
Well, as a favorite photographer, and that's not a current photographer, but Cartier-Bresson is very important for me. You, as a street photographer, certainly know his photography and are probably also influenced by it in some way or another. I have one photographer that I'm lucky enough to be teaming up with for a workshop, actually, and that's Trevor Cole from Ireland.
All right.
Is and he does landscape photography, and it's very bright and colorful and crisp landscapes with very contrasty skies and things. And I like that. But what I like even more about him is the way he works with people. I've learned a lot from him about photographing people. He was one of the 3 photographers in Ethiopia in November. And just spending those 2 weeks with him and watching him, how he interacts with people, and watching him, how he gets them to pose for him, and how he gets, not always, but most of the time, he gets the photo where I would have given up quite a while ago. That is an amazing learning experience for me, because, I mean, everyone, if you shoot pictures of people, you have the choice of doing it in a candid fashion, or you communicate with them and you interact with them in some way. And there's so much I can learn from him in that respect. So,
and you're doing the Donegal workshop with
him as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
As well. Yeah. So that is mostly landscape related.
That's a nice way to think of a photographer, actually, because a lot of the immediate response I get, obviously for obvious reasons, is that the favorite photography is because of the work that they see in the print or in the image. And with this particular photographer, it's a little bit different. He's a great teacher. Actually, he's a great teacher.
He used to be a teacher. But it's also the resulting portraits that he does. Those are just brilliant as well. And it's this combination of him being an excellent teacher and the work that comes out of that.
That's fantastic. That's a nice approach, actually, on your favorite photographer. I like that. And well, Henri Cartier-Bresson, everyone names him as the master. There are many other street photography masters that I could have. Brassai comes to mind immediately. My personal favorite is Saul Leiter, but there's so many that reel off, and so many that you can learn from as well. Which and that's the beauty of photography, isn't it? There's so much going on today, with photography being probably at its most popular ever, with the accessibility of just your iPhone or your DSLR camera and all the other social networks that we've got. It's truly an amazing time to be involved with photography. So,
true, very true.
And then, of course, at the end of the day, they got podcasts to listen to yourselves, and maybe if they want to dabble, listen to my little old YouTubes as well.
Of course.
Which brings me very neatly to say that I'm in the process of updating my iTunes on the podcast on iTunes, rather. It's going to take me some time because I've got somewhere in around about 40 odd shows to catch up with, but a bit of homework for me to do. So you can find me on that. Photography Live and Uncut will be on the iTunes. I'm going to put every single link that I can find for Chris. Tips on the Top Floor, chrismarquardt.com, Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, all those. I'll put that in the blog so that we won't waste anybody's time.
Discover the topfloor.com. That's most important one, because that's where I sell my tours and I want to keep doing them.
Okay, that'll be top of the list then. That'll be top of the list. But really, just to say thank you so much for joining me today, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for someone that's been doing over 670 odd shows, and you've literally just completed another one is before we came online. Thank you so much for sparing the time to talk to me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's suffice to say, you don't know this line, Chris, because I didn't tell you before the show, but the way I end up my show, if you're going out shooting this weekend, everyone, like me, leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you. Bye for now.